Hello everyone, this is Vet Talk and I'm your host, Sergeant Gonzalo Duran. Today's honored guest is Atiba Dey, Army veteran and community activist. Atiba, thank you for being here today.
Yes, thank you, Brother Sergeant Duran. Kudos to you for having me, allowing me to be on Vet Talk and giving an expression of who I am and what I do. Thank you.
Well, when the people hear why you're here today, I think the honor is ours. Atiba, for the people that don't know who you are, would you mind telling the audience who you are?
Okay, my name is Atiba Dey, and through the Veterans Association or the Veterans apparatus, it's Atiba Dey Jr. I just had that conversation with you, and just to delve a little bit more into that, and for the record, on the record, my name was and is Nathan Bruce Jr., but I had my name amended back in 1995, 1996 to be Atiba Dey, and through the Veterans, Jr. So that encapsulates it all.
Well, thank you for the name appropriation. I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And a little bit about your background from the neighborhood you grew up in, and maybe delve into a little to your military career.
Okay, I am an Army veteran. I can express it like this. I'm a Vietnam era vet. I went into the military volunteer draft in 1966, and I was separated in 1968, which gave me a 2-year stint in active duty in the military. I did my basic in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. My overseas duty, I was stationed in Nuremberg, Germany, which was a whole different episode within itself. If I have time, I can go into that a little bit later. But yeah, that was my military induction, if you will, and my military experience. Honorably discharged in 1968.
And you're originally from what area?
I'm originally born and bred in the Bronx, New York. Born in November 1946 in the Bronx, New York. And I'm currently still living in the borough of the Bronx.
Now, I bring that up because from what I know, from our history that we've known each other, and what I've come to know recently, you've been embodied within the Bronx community. So one of the topics I'd like to talk about today first is your story with the Bronx Cemetery, which is a veterans cemetery in West Farms, I believe?
Yes.
Would you jump into that a little bit?
It is known as the Soldiers Cemetery. If I'm not mistaken, it's the name is escaping me, but it's the Soldiers Cemetery located on 180th Street, Bryant Avenue in the Bronx, New York. A 2-3 minute walk from something very popular, the Bronx Zoo. I got involved at the Soldiers Cemetery back in 2006, 2007. We used to have a Bronx parade, a Bronx parade where we used to walk from 176th Street, 175th, 176th Street, and Southern Boulevard, up Southern Boulevard to 180th Street, and we'll consummate or conclude at the Soldiers Cemetery. And from there we used to, scatter about, go into different areas to commemorate our gathering or commemorate the soldiers' cemetery and our involvement with a cookout or a gathering, if you will. And I started that I was involved in that in 2007, 2008, I think we did it. The last time we had a parade had to be back in 2018, 2019. The Bronx, that's what it was called, the Bronx Task Force Parade.
Okay, I do remember that. Unfortunately I never attended it, and I'm assuming, obviously with the change in officials in that area, and I think the American Legion may be closing down in that area probably affected that. I'm going to look into that. That's something that's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
But thank you for giving that extra information. And for the audience that may not know, veterans there are very few, and I believe New York has at least one military cemetery where veterans are depending on their service status and their backgrounds and their discharge, can be buried in a New York State cemetery.
Yeah.
The one that we're talking about right now is more of a historical one. So those are from like back in the 1800s or and further back, I believe. So thank you for sharing with us that. Another topic I'd like to talk about is, I know you recently went on a trip to DC to speak to Hakeem Jeffries and his office members. Would you explain on some of that information?
In my involvement with the Bronx chapter of NABVETS, National Association for Black Veterans, the sitting commander and the regional commander, Kevin C. Meggett, organized a trip to visit the Washington, D.C., Hakeem Jeffries and his staff, so we were able to gather together, go to make expressions on how we're being treated as veterans, what our involvement is as veterans, what our involvement is as advocates for veterans in our area and veterans in general across the board. I said that I'm a member of NABVETS, which is, again, National Association for Black Veterans, not of Black veterans, but for Black veterans, because we know we need to be able to have expressions of our own dealing with veterans of different ethnic backgrounds. And we stand true to it. We stand true to know that we have gathered together, we have been doing the work, and we will continue to do the work as veterans and veterans of different ethnic backgrounds, not just Black veterans, as it's called, Black veterans, but as veterans ourselves. We get an expression, but our voice has never truly been heard, if that makes sense. So,
no, I agree with you on that. We've talked briefly regarding voices not being heard, discrimination on other at different times. So thank you for bringing that up. But I was privy to that visit when you went to DC, and I remember one important thing that you did mention. You're like, I don't want people to know. I don't want people talking on behalf of us. I want us to be talking, and I thought that was so powerful, and it stuck with me on many different levels, and I've heard you speak on that at different times. I know you can't just regurgitate that speech that day, but would you talk on it a little bit?
I could give a point of view, if you will. There is a disconnect, and this is one of the comments that I made. There is a disconnect as the veterans, I'm going to use the expression of color. if you will. That's a whole different, different thing. Black veterans, if you will. And what that gets to is, as a veteran of color who was willing to give his life for the sake of this country as it is known, we have not, and I have not been afforded I'm looking for the word, I have not been afforded the real opportunity to be addressed as the veteran who did serve this country, who was willing to put his life on the line for this country. My neighborhood at that time didn't reflect it. My status, my circumstances at that time did not reflect it. Even up to and including today, it still does not reflect my sacrifice as a veteran. There is a list of things that could be and should be done. If not, it should even be looked into as to how we are affected as brothers and sisters in the military and as veterans, how we have been and are affected in the past, present, and have to look down into the future. What the disconnect has done to us and is doing to us.
Nice.
If that.
No, and I agree with you. And you know, we came in at two different generations in veteran in our time, and you know, for me, while I was in through boot camp, through my first duty stations, to my time there, you know, I didn't really see too much of a difference when I say in that content. You know, maybe it's different when you're in different bases or different situations, but for me as a Marine in California and then in New York, that part I wasn't really affected with that much. I would say I've seen them more as a veteran, more so than anything, because now the diversity is opened up, because now it's, you know, were you infantry, were you deployed, were you this, were you that? You know, my mindset has always been, we're veterans.
Yeah.
And the end of the day, we all stepped on the yellow lines, we all did our, you know, indoctrination, and we all served our country in our own way. So, you know, that's the way I try to look at it. But once again, we talked about this, you know, beforehand. Discrimination comes in many forms. So,
many forms.
And, you know, but I think we hit on that more than enough today. I like to delve into how we can fight back on that, you know, and the number one way, and this is where we've come to know each other, is through NABVETS #0029 chapter. Would you go in a little more depth on not only your background with the organization, and then we'll move on to something that I really want to hit on.
Okay. Again, NABVET, the Bronx chapter #0029, which gives us our distinction, and our distinction has been one that I got involved with it in 2006, 2007. At the time, someone who you're very familiar with, Commander Leroy Archibald, was the sitting commander. But I also found out that Commander Archibald was also being guided and ushered into the commander's realm through some other veterans. I'll mention Joseph Gallant, Jerry White, Sedgwick Smith, which we affectionately call Brother R2. They were some of the lead people who I was involved with when I first got into the Bronx chapter. There's a number of different veterans. I could mention Carrie Taft, Walter Thomas, Joanne Session, just to name a few, at the local level, local chapter level. Then we were also involved with the state and regional level, which was at the regional level was this female veteran, Wendy McClinton, what's her name? Mariel Frazier, and another veteran who has since passed on, Brother Herbert Sweat, who was instrumental yet detrimental to the Bronx chapter and the overall. To my knowledge, at the time there was 4 standing chapters in the Bronx, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens. We never had a Staten Island chapter. The 5th or 6th one was there was a strong women's chapter back during that time. And over the years, through different avenues, if you will, the other chapters began to falter along the way. But the Bronx chapter, as it was and as it is, was able to wave through the different storms and adversities, if you will, and the Bronx chapter stood the test of time. The Bronx chapter is still standing today through the trials and tribulations that it's been through. And the Bronx chapter is still striving to make sure that we maintain our voices. We mentioned the Bronx Cemetery, the Bronx Soldiers Cemetery. And I'm bringing that up because part of the Bronx chapter's mission statement and part of the mission statement of NABVET is to do monuments, to make sure we maintain cemeteries and veterans artifacts, veterans memorials, veterans statues, and all that's involved in that surrounding.
And for the audience that may not know, the names that you are mentioning, these individuals, they started with NABVETS and were instrumental in the foundation, but they've also branched out. You know, Sherry McClinton, I remember now, is the CEO of the Black Social Justice in Brooklyn. Herbert Sweats, I believe, he started a program with the correctional and the court system for the veterans.
Yeah.
Others have gone to work for the State Department, you know, et cetera, veterans, you know, organizations. So, you know, and I mentioned that, and I want to be specific because now when we talk about the event that you guys had just 2 or 3 weeks ago, that's the 20th anniversary of NABVETS chapter #0029. You know, and that's not an easy thing to do, and especially during the time frames that we've had to cross in this last couple of years. Also, the work that's being done. You know, you hit on the preservation part, but we're also talking about policies that you guys are enactive. Each member has their own function, works like a unit for their own community, helping out in certain little ways, whether it's a parade, whether it's preservation, whether it's policy, whether it's this. And, you know, I remember I went to the anniversary. Now, I was one of the few people that were, let's say, I was not black there, but I'm like, you know, once again, the community there wasn't anything different or anything changes.
Yeah.
So I was very happy to see that and to be a part of that and to learn about that, because that pushed me to learn more and more than I knew before. Because once again, my involvement with Leroy Archibald, God rest his soul, rest in peace, Archie. You know, when I was advocating as a fresh veteran, you know, he was there, one of the first people to push me forward on the works that I've done, and a lot of people don't know. And I've been very fortunate to speak at NABVETS regional event last year, so that people can understand, because there was a lot of NABVET members that didn't know how much Archie was involved in local law 119 and helping Devil Dog and other organizations come together so that the discrimination, once again, that word discrimination, on veterans coming back home, student veterans not being able to use their GI Bill for the purposes of housing. So in a dot of the work that's being done not only by NABVETS and his members, that's just one tiny example. Another one was the soldiers cemetery that we spoke about, putting flags, cleaning up the area.
Yeah.
Those are things that the general population, they may not see it, but it's out there and it's being done, and it's being done by not only NABVETS, but the veterans that are not only want to improve our community, but are doing it right now as well. Mm-hmm. So, we've hit on a lot of topics, but I want to talk one that's more personal for you, which is the Big Apple. I know I'm saying it wrong. The flights that they have.
The Big Apple flight.
Big Apple flight. Thank you. Would you tell us your experience on it?
Yeah. Oh, I had such a tremendous experience dealing with, and my hat off to the organizers, the staff, and everyone involved and concerned with the Big Apple flight. I have heard about it over the years, but I myself never got involved in it. This past last month, this month, May the 9th, I was able to attend the Big Apple flight, and what a glorious, adventurous part of the journey. They organized us, a lot of different vets from the Vietnam era, to get together and do what they call give us our flowers while we were still here. What that means is that the organizers of the Big Apple flight got if I'm not mistaken, it was at least 77 some odd vets together. They got our information, they chartered a flight to take us to Washington, D.C. to visit the various monuments, Vietnam, the wall, I'm blocking the other ones, the whole memorandum of different events for veterans down in Washington, D.C., up to and including the changing of the guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier, which was absolutely a tremendous part. I've never taken much interest in it, but being there to experience it was well worth everything that was involved in it. Okay. And it was a lot of involvement going on up to and including the Big Apple flight. Some of the things that I've learned after and during the Big Apple flight was something that was just overwhelming, very, very touching, to put it in words. It was very, very touching. On the Big Apple flight, they did something called the mail call. The mail call was where they had our family members, and this is something I found out after the Big Apple flight. They had our family members go out and get letters and cards and whatnot, write them out to us, and they put it all in an envelope. And on the flight back to New York, they said, soldiers, we have a mail call for y'all. Y'all remember mail call? We didn't have a clue. And they started calling the soldiers, the individual soldiers' name, Sergeant so-and-so, Captain so-and-so, General so-and-so, Specialist so-and-so. Okay, they got down to me, Specialist Atiba Dey, which I was a specialist fourth class upon separation. Specialist Atiba Dey, and they gave me a vanilla envelope with letters and different letters and cards from family members, which blew my mind. All the military personnel that was on the flight, as they got their mail call envelope, and on the flight back, we opening it and reading it, everyone was teary-eyed. Very, very, very emotional. And as that was one of the highlights of the trip. But what really blew me out of the frame was when we got back into LaGuardia Airport on the way back to our individual homes. They had gathered, and the Big Apple flight, I salute y'all again, they had paid for family members to be there to greet us. My daughter, who lives in Atlanta, Georgia, when I spoke to her a couple of times during the week, she was telling me she wasn't feeling well, and she was, not feeling well and going through what she was going through. My belief was that she was at her home in Atlanta, Georgia. And I come to find out later, even though she wasn't feeling well, she traveled to be up in the New York area to welcome me home, which was...
That's beautiful. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
and I have a video of it. Even now, when I see it, I get emotional because it was so involved and absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, rewarding.
Glad to hear that. Now, quickly, Atiba, would you happen to tell the individuals that may want to reach out to you how they can do so?
Okay, again, my name is Atiba Dey. I can be reached by my email address, atiba1115@gmail.com. Would it be all right for me to add a telephone number?
It's up to you.
Okay, my telephone would be 646-232-6358. Again, Atiba, 646-232-6358. My phone is never off, part of my service. Can I mention my Bissell Gardens experience?
Well, actually, we're pressed for time at the moment. For those that are watching, I want to thank our MMN family for helping us film here today. I want to thank our executive producer, Gary Lutz, and our stage manager today, Corey. With that being said, I want to thank you all. God bless you, and God bless America.